Welcome to Aspire this morning. We're so grateful you chose to be with us. I'm standing here at Mount Soledad in San Diego behind a very familiar landmark. But what's really sad about this landmark is it is a typical symbol that most people associate with a man who lived 2,000 years ago who only talked about love and the unconditional nature of God. And to me, it seems very tragic that this is the only way in which we remember the way of Jesus as the Christ. In this particular program, we're going to go way beyond that kind of example. To me, this whole thing is a sad portrayal because Jesus did not want to be known of as a man who was hung on a cross. He wanted to be known, well, as he told his disciples. He said, if you're going to remember me, love ye one another as I have loved you. That's truly one of the most important teachings of life, to learn to love each other unconditionally, just the way Jesus loved his disciples when they were confused, when they were concerned, and when they were even running away from him, denying his presence, their knowledge of him. So now, in this particular program, we're going to look at another side of Jesus, not as some Savior that came to shed his blood for you, which is not the truth. We're going to look at a man who became a spiritual master, who taught some of the most revolutionary teachings the world has ever seen on love, on God, and on truth. So if you have the heart, come be with us as we take a very unusual look at the way of the Christ on Aspire.
Ever since the dawn of humankind, we've sought the origins of our life and its purpose. Some have chosen to look to science, religion, or philosophy for answers. Many have turned to the great masters such as Lao-tzu, the Buddha, and Jesus Christ for spiritual illumination. Still others have sought truth through their own direct experience. All of us are searching, knowingly or unknowingly, for enlightenment, truth, and harmony in our lives. This program, hosted by Dr. Gregory Penn, will help you aspire to a more fulfilling and rewarding life.
Every day we take a step, we understand, the closer that we get, we'll find in who we are. We choose between the left and right, the ups and downs, the darkness or the light, we'll find in who we are.
There comes a moment in our life that is like no other moment in our living. It has nothing to do with the tick of the clock. It has to do with something going on, a process going on deep within us that much of the time we are not aware of. It happened to the man Jesus. It happened to Gautama Buddha. It happened to Lao-tzu. It happened to Muktananda. And it will happen to you. It will happen to me. It is an occurrence that has nothing at all to do with time, but it is a moment of eternity, when time actually stops within us and we no longer can live the way we have lived before. Up to now, our life has been nothing more than curiosity. We're curious to see what we can do and how far we can go. There will come a time when that curiosity has its end within us. And life will not be so much, what can I get? What can I have? What can I do? How far can I go? Life will then be a matter of, what am I all about? Who am I really? I mean, not the human self of us, not where we take on elaborate philosophies and religions and spiritual ideas and conceptualize them into some sort of rigmarole of thoughts and attitudes and idealisms. No, it's a moment where we actually come into ourself, where we've had enough futility, we've had enough of living off the land, so to speak, and now we're ready to live off the spirit of our being. This is a very significant moment in our life, truly the single most significant, because everything stops. No one can give you this moment. It is a moment when your spirituality, when the truth of you is more important than anything else in your life, when the absolute truth of you is the most important, when you really want to know who you are beyond the physical plane into the spiritual plane, into the eternal plane. There is a part of every one of us that is eternal. It is not theoretical, it is not earthly, it is not philosophical, it is hardly religious. It's been called many things in the world. Some people call it the Christ. Buddhists call it Buddha nature. Whatever you call it, it really doesn't matter. It is the eternal part of you. And when we begin to look past our physical being, past our material being, we begin to see beyond our mental realm, we begin to see the spiritual. Once you're on that path, you can never go back. It is the path of the infinite within you. It is the path of your life. And to follow it is the most important thing you will ever do. We have trouble with spirituality, basically, because spirituality is alive. It's an alive quality within us. We're dead. And when I say dead, I mean we are unaware. The very word alive means awareness. The only moment that you and I are ever alive is when we are aware of ourselves and aware of what is around us. People still have trouble with that Master Jesus because he was alive. He wasn't teaching dead knowledge, dead doctrines, dead religion. Whenever we learn about anything, knowledge becomes the barrier between ourselves and our own awareness. People can give you books and tapes and all sorts of things about knowledge, but knowledge is dead because it's borrowed. It's not a real quality. The part of you that is alive and is real has yet to be tapped. Look at Jesus for a moment. The only way we know him is through an historical book or text. But I say you can know the Master without ever meeting him because he is alive in you, so to speak, as a quality of consciousness, the Christ consciousness in you. And that consciousness is the only part of us that truly is alive, vibrant, and has a sense of being. We miss that Christ consciousness because we are too busy reading about the man and not living the teachings. If you begin to really look at his teachings, that is the Master Jesus teachings, you'll begin to see that they're very challenging. Not because they're complicated with intellectual dogma and creed and ceremony and ritual, but because his teachings talk about an aliveness within us, an aliveness of being. You're going to see that the most difficult thing in life is to be alive. But when we are alive, we discover the Christ in us. Religion is so hooked on the idea of taking the Bible literally that we actually miss what the real meaning and the significance of the work in the Bible is all about. Many people think that Jesus' words are to be taken literally. For instance, even the concept of the only begotten Son of God. It's only equated to the man Jesus, as if you are not the only begotten Son of God. There is something within each and every human being that is the only begotten Son of God. It is a quality of your own Christ consciousness, and it does live in that. It lives in you. It lives in the awareness of itself. But we miss it, and you'll never find it with knowledge. You'll never find it with reading. You'll never find it in anything outside of yourself. Only when you cannot stand it one moment longer, where you must seek within yourself and you are deeply interested in the kind of person that you really are beyond your persona of personality and ego. You see, there is an ungodly part of us, so to speak. It's the ungodly part of us that we have created. This ungodly part of us is the personality and the ego of us, where we begin to only live out of what other people say is right and wrong, good and bad, where we begin to take life literally. The only begotten Son of God in you is the place where God dwells in you. It is beyond your fears. It is beyond the ego. It's beyond your knowledge. It's in that simple place where silence is where you live, where your beingness is not questioned, where the acceptance of the is always a part of your life. If Jesus was trying to teach us anything, and he was very serious about his teachings, he said that we would do the same works that he did and even greater. You don't hear many people talk about that concept. You don't hear many people talk about the idea that we are too the only begotten Son of God. and we are. It takes practice and effort. So much has to be lost. You have to lose everything to find the Christ in you. You're going to have to lose all of the things that you've clung onto in the form of fear, in the form of anger, idealism, religion. Most people are not willing to give that up. They think in terms of life as being the most valuable thing that they have in the context of just knowledge and information. There'll come a time when you will be able to see that your knowledge and your, so to speak, inspiration from books and tapes and other people is going to wear off. Where the only thing that will really matter is your own direct experience in God. And when that direct experience is really looked at seriously and lived in, then you will begin to see within yourself that you are God. You know, one of the major things that religion does to us is it tells us that Jesus' teachings were about him, but really they're about all of us. One of the exceptions that I take with conventional forms of religion is that they're saying in essence to us, you could never achieve the Christ in you. And yet every single teaching that Jesus offered to us was a secret of the spirituality that lives in all of us to open us up. Let me give you an example. On the Mount, Jesus said, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." Please notice that Jesus did not say, "Blessed are the knowledgeable, blessed are those who have read all scriptures, blessed are those people who have followed Moses or even myself." He was saying, "Blessed are the people who are pure in heart." It is only with a pure in heart that we begin to see God within us. Some people think it blasphemy to even consider the idea that the Christ lives within you and me, but it does. And until we begin to really be aware of that there's something more to ourselves than just the human nature that we have lived by, we're just going to be dabbling in religion as though it were some sort of philosophy. And philosophy doesn't get us anywhere in our life. You see, Jesus is really a very dangerous person, isn't he? He seeks to open up things within us that we would not normally take a hard look at. When we think of the way of the Christ within us, we think of the way of meditation, of kindness, of compassion. We begin to look far deeper than just the physical attributes of religion. We begin to not look just at his words. You can know the Christ just as it was written and talked about 2,000 years ago if you will begin to see it within your heart. We're going to take a moment right now and come back, and I want to show you that Jesus' best disciple was a prostitute. Stay tuned. Let's look at Mary Magdalene for a moment. She was a very important person to Jesus in many ways. She was the only person that really saw Jesus for what he was, beyond the man to the Christ in him. And it's interesting to me that symbolically, she was the first person to see Jesus resurrect. And that is an interesting concept in itself. Why wasn't it anyone else? Why wasn't it Matthew or John or Peter? Because it couldn't have been. It had to be Mary. Mary Magdalene, the prostitute, had the heart to see beyond the mysteries that the mind cannot understand. There's a tremendous mystery in the death and resurrection of the man Jesus. It has nothing to do with logic and reasoning. Mary Magdalene, this very famous prostitute, went beyond her concept of Jesus as a man, as a sexual man, a physical man, and began to understand that the love that he had for all of us was beyond sex. It was beyond the mind and reasoning. She had the heart to see Jesus just as he was. And we have many instances of that, which I will go into in just a moment. We have to have the heart of a Mary Magdalene if we are to see the Christ in ourselves and in each other. We can't have the mind of a Peter, a doubting Peter, or a doubting Thomas. We can't have the mind of a Judas. We have to have the heart of a Mary Magdalene. Mary was able to move past all of her sins, so to speak, move past all of her experiences, her poor self-image, the pain and the suffering that she must have lived as a prostitute in. Yes, you know, a prostitute lives a very desolate, arid life. Mary Magdalene was a very interesting person. She began to touch something very deep and very sincere in all human beings, the heart of a person. With that, Mary was able to see the Christ, not only at the resurrection, but afterwards. Why was Mary his greatest disciple? Because she had the wisdom to go beyond her eyes, to go beyond her ears, to go beyond her preconceived notions of looking at Jesus just as a man. You and I need to do that too. We need to have that consciousness where we look at Jesus not as a man, a religious symbolic figure, but to see Jesus for what he was, a spiritual master, a master ready at any moment to take us into the fires of our heart and to bring us closer to ourselves. Mary Magdalene is the very key to the resurrection and to the life of Jesus. She was the single greatest disciple Jesus had. The greatest story about Mary Magdalene is that very beautiful moment in her life where she comes to Jesus. The other disciples are there, of course, especially Judas. And Judas is watching along with the other disciples who are very, very jealous of this woman, Mary Magdalene, a prostitute that follows Jesus all around. And she takes Jesus' feet and she cleans them or washes them with her tears and anoints his feet with oil and then wipes it with her hair. This is a symbolic gesture of great humility, of gratitude. Judas can only look at this whole instance and get upset about it, become angry. And he says to Jesus, "We could have sold that oil and given the money to the poor." He totally missed the idea of what Mary Magdalene is doing. Judas is too doggone practical to be able to see the beauty and the significance of the moment as Mary Magdalene, in her own way, kind of repents her whole life, sees the beauty of the Christ in Jesus, and gives herself over to it. The other disciples, they miss it entirely. Jesus looks at poor Judas, feels sorry for him, and he says to Judas, "Judas, you'll always have the poor with you, but me you will not always have." He was right. We'll always have those people who are too doggone practical to see the beauty and the significance of a spiritual moment. This woman had come to Jesus to change her whole life. And isn't it interesting that it was a prostitute that did this? In those days, as well as probably in today's world, a prostitute is considered the lowest form of the social ladder. But Jesus accepted her with whole heart and love. And Mary Magdalene shows us again something about surrender to the Christ. You see, it wasn't the wastage of the oil on Jesus' feet that is really the key here. Nothing was wasted. Mary was giving to Jesus an offering from her heart to her master. You see, Mary had done something that very few people can do. A sinner can see what the saint cannot. Mary was able to see beyond Jesus as a man, as a human being, as a sexual person. She was able to accept and love Jesus as the Christ. She woke up by anointing his feet in humility and then wiping his feet with her hair. She began to see something that most of us miss entirely. She was able to see the heart of Jesus. The disciples that were standing around watching the anointing of this oil on the feet of Jesus were far too practical, competitive, far too cynical to understand that there was one very touching moment that was happening between two people. We miss these moments because we're too cynical, too practical, too religious. We can't see that this is the most intimate moment between a disciple and the master. Mary had become a true disciple of the Christ, something that we don't see in any other place in the Bible. Why? Because Mary was able to get beyond herself. When you see the beauty of a master such as Jesus, what is there left to do but to cry? What is there left to do but to give the gift? I'd like to talk to you about the two things that this symbolizes. Mary first gives her gratitude to the master. She is grateful for the gift of the life that Jesus had to offer. She was able to go beyond the conception of him as a man, as a person, to begin to see the spirit of him. That is the truest form of gratitude. And then she took it further. She took it into the realm of her meekness and her humility. Most of us are not humble enough to see the spirit of life, much less the spirit of anything greater than life, such as the Christ. We're too busy analyzing, theorizing, having our own concepts. Mary was totally willing to let go of her old life and to sit at the feet of her master and to listen and to understand and to work with the spaces between the words. The real communion between people is not in the words that we say to each other, but in the spirit in which we invoke through each other. So when you are working with your own meditation, listen to the spaces. It is there that you will find life. In that life, you will find a new purpose for yourself. Mary is truly the greatest disciple of the Master, for she sees him as he is, as the Son of the living God. Jesus really had a handle on Mary Magdalene, and she really understood who he was too. He said about her that she was forgiven much for the sins that she had because she loved so much. What a wonderful thing to say about someone. Mary Magdalene, for all of her sins, and they just weren't sexual, for all of her sins was forgiven and was really allowed to live under the compassion and the shelter of the compassion of a God that is a merciful God, a loving God. Their relationship, Jesus and Mary Magdalene, was not the usual man-woman relationship. It was a relationship of two hearts that had come together in a mutual understanding of each other. Jesus knew who Mary Magdalene was. Therefore, he could see that her sins were forgiven. As well, Mary Magdalene, getting beyond the male-female thing, was able to see Jesus just for what he was, the Christ. And that's a very unusual place to be in. You see, you can't just look at a Jesus from the point of view of history. You can't look at a Jesus from a religious point of view. You'll miss him. We have to have the heart of a Mary Magdalene, a heart that goes beyond just the physical, traditional side of a relationship, in the shelter and in the compassion of the love of one's heart, the Christ in us. I hope now that you'll take a different look at a Jesus, and instead of looking at him from a hard, cold, historical, religious, analytical point of view, you'll begin to see that, yes, that Christ nature lives in all of us. And when we have the heart of Mary Magdalene, the great disciple, we will begin to see, too, that we have the ability to go beyond appearances to be able to see the Christ in all persons. Namaste. Well, I'm very grateful that, again, you chose to be with us for Aspire, and I hope you enjoyed this particular segment. I think it's time to take Jesus off the cross and put him back in our hearts where he belongs. Jesus didn't die for our sins, and we shouldn't be remembering this kind of thing about Jesus. He offered us too much to be remembering him for this cruel form of death. Jesus was a spiritual master. He came to offer us much more than salvation. He offered to us an insight into ourselves that is very unique. His teachings were revolutionary. He wasn't teaching religion. He wasn't teaching doctrine or philosophy. He was teaching us the way of our heart, how to get close to God. And some of his greatest teachings deal with seeing God in the purity of our heart. If we're to really keep the commandments that Jesus gave to us, we won't be thinking of him from this point of view of a cross. We will be thinking of him from a practical point of view in our heart. We'll begin to live his teachings so dramatically, with such spirited love, that we will allow our whole life to be changed. It's up to us. I know it's traditional to think of Jesus as this suffering martyr, but that's not what he wanted to be known as. He wanted to be known as the great love teacher, the teacher who offered to us the compassionate nature of God and revealed that not only through his life, but told us that you and I have the same opportunity to reveal that spirit through our lives. Let's remember Jesus as the master of which he was. In future programs, beginning with this one, we're going to talk a lot about this as we go into the Gnostic Gospels and seek to understand more another side of Jesus, not so religious, much more spiritual, realistic, looking at him as the master that he was, the great teacher, the great way shower of our heart. Thank you for allowing me to share with you this morning. Namaste.